They can be more spiritual protection than sledging your That should be better. All right. So I know the kids are still getting their food, but we're going to go ahead and get started so we don't stay here too late, because I know we're also bumping up against bedtime for a lot of us. So, yeah, I'm Dr. Jake. You've met my family. For those of you that aren't aware, we are live streaming this. So if your kids run through screaming, the whole world will see. Probably most likely to be my children because, again, approaching that bedtime hour. So this is probably one of my favorite. Yeah, we're not gonna go. We're gonna stay here. Yeah, you fix cars. I didn't know. You want to go play with them? Yeah. So we're gonna really dive into some of these issues that most directly relate to us as parents. The stage that we're in, the stage that our kids are in, and how that relates to health. So obviously, I have 3 children. These pictures are no more current than what's actually in my arms and running around the office right now. So I'm really excited and passionate about children's health. The kids are the future, and if we can set up a culture for them, then they have a long ways that they can go. And really, that's our mission here. It's to create a culture of health. If we want to change the trajectory of healthcare, it has to start with these guys. We've got too many ingrained habits and patterns that really undo our best efforts at every turn. And so it's going to come from creating a culture of health that our kids can inherit so that they can inherit a better world for themselves. So let's get into this. So, the United States is one of the sickest industrialized nations in the world. Our healthcare system, has some of the most common heart disease, cancer, diabetes. It's very prevalent. Almost 85% of Americans will die of those 3 diseases right there, or complications thereof. And so if we're going to come at this, we have to start early, because some of the stats on this are pretty abysmal. Over 1 in 4 of our kids already have at least one of these chronic diseases, and 5% of those have multiple of those. So the most common ones are asthma, diabetes, obesity, ADHD, depression, and believe it or not, malnutrition. Because a lot of what our kids are dealing with is an overabundance of calories and not enough nutrient content. And so these are, for the most part, autoimmune in nature. Autoimmune, meaning that our kids' immune systems are not where they should be. So we're going to get into this a little more, because really what this comes down to is a failure of our mindsets and a failure of culture. Culturally, what our society does is it lives in fear of disease, and we live in a very medicalized healthcare industry and healthcare culture. Medicine is a study of disease and what makes man sick, right? Cheryl can tell us a bunch about pathology. But does studying disease make anyone any healthier? Does it prevent any of these things? Now, B.J. Palmer said, that medicine is a study of disease and what makes man sick, but chiropractic is a study of health and what makes man well, what causes man to live. And so there's really 2 different philosophies and cultures behind this, and it's really the heart of the issue. When it comes to parenting, Annika over here, she's a toddler, right? 2.5, right, Annika? Yeah, 2.5. And so you don't always stay on your feet very well, and you get owies on your knees, right? Yeah. What does God do to your owies? He healed that leg? Yeah, because God heals her owies. Yeah, and we started off, and she would have these tumbles, and she would scrape her knees, and we'd want to put a Band-Aid on it. And so she started asking for Band-Aids. But then we changed our vocabulary. We started saying, God's going to heal it. And so she started saying, God's going to heal it. And it's a completely different perspective on the very same thing. One is saying that this is a damage, this is an insult to this awesome creation that God made, and it needs help. It needs a Band-Aid to heal. But in all seriousness, does it actually need that Band-Aid to heal? No, the Band-Aid's more or less to cover it up and to keep the blood from getting on her clothes, right? But what it does need is it needs no interference. So if she fell and slipped and cut her knee, which she did a few days ago on the walk to the park, and she got a pebble in there. That pebble is going to interfere with the healing process, isn't it? The body will actually form material, callus or cyst or something over top of that. And it will start the healing process around it, but that pebble will still interfere with it. If we remove the pebble, now there's no interference in that healing process. It won't have a cyst, it won't have a callus. The scab there will be temporary, and ultimately, when you're this young, you heal without a scar for something so small. And so really, the body needs no help, it just needs no interference. And that's our whole philosophy, is if we can find the interference with whatever condition you're walking in with, or even better, if we can focus on prevention as opposed to reaction, we're going to set ourselves and, more importantly, our kids up for a so much brighter future. Right, Annika? Yeah. That's so good. You're going to go get some food? Yeah. So we're going to walk through all the different stages of childhood and what the key aspects of each of those are. And then hopefully we'll answer a lot of the questions that you have about health and healthcare and what your kids are doing to deal with. So I want to start with the most important stage. And when my wife and I, Kirsten, we got married, we talked about kids even before we got married. And I happened to be going through chiropractic school very shortly thereafter. We started learning all this stuff about health. And we knew that we wanted kids. We also wanted careers. But we knew that if we were going to have kids, that we wanted to be healthy before we had the kids. Because our kids inherit our health. You talk about the microbiome. Your kids get your microbiome, which is why she has the same allergies that I do. Because she inherited my microbiome in combination with my wife's. It makes a difference going into the pregnancy, what's going on. Now, at a certain point, it becomes too late, right? The kids are what the kids are. Then we take the next most important stage. It's the actual pregnancy itself. There's research that shows that even a kid's appetite is determined by what the mom eats and what the mom prefers. So the foods that the mom prefers during pregnancy actually leads itself long-term to what they end up with, what they end up preferring. And it all comes down to how you're preparing for this. So Kirsten and I started preparing very early. We knew she had a scoliosis. We fixed the scoliosis. We knew there were some other things going on. She had an egg allergy. We removed the eggs from the diet and worked very closely with that to make sure that we were getting her healed from that. By the time Annika was born, her egg allergy was gone. Now, it did take a full child and a half before we got to that point. It took many years of doing that. But absolutely, we were looking at all those things. We were preparing ahead of time. We took that prevention mindset into the entire thing. So, chiropractic for pregnancy. The most important time for your baby to get adjusted is before it's even born. And it's because of the nerve supply that goes out to the uterus. Now, many of you have gotten adjusted while pregnant, and it's fantastic as pain relief, but it's even more important that as you're growing a baby, that nerve supply go out to the uterus so that those nutrients that you're supplying and growing that baby with are going to the right places. They're being formed accurately. Because it's ultimately the intelligence between your body as a mother and your baby's intelligence that's just growing inside them to determine how that baby's going to grow and develop, and then also what you supply in nutritionally and help them avoid from a toxicity perspective. And so that's why chiropractic is so important during and just, even more so before pregnancy, because we want to make sure that we're providing everything that they need. So from a nutrition perspective, this is why we've come up with these two different packets. Number one is the daily essentials for women. So if you're not pregnant, this is a great way to cover all of your bases and make sure that should you get pregnant, you have what you need. Now, once you know that you're pregnant or you're actively breastfeeding, it's important to make the switch over to the prenatals, because the prenatals support proper folate levels, they support proper iron levels, and then it also has osteo support as well, because you've got to grow an entire skeletal structure basically using just what you have. And if you're not giving yourself enough calcium or potassium or magnesium or any of the other 16 minerals that help to make up healthy child bones, you're going to be leaching those directly from your own bones into your bloodstream and then into the baby. So your body will sacrifice your health to keep your baby alive. It's pretty crazy, but your body, the intelligence inside there, actually prioritizes your baby's life over your own, much like you do as a mom, just in general. You prioritize your kid's life, your kid's health as a mom over your own. So then we get to newborn minutes. So I've got one of those, not really running around yet. You know, we've got another one over there, working on his leg strength over there. But I wanted to point this out, milestone. This is something that the CDC and the American Academy of Pediatrics, they do a lot of research on to figure out what those milestones are. Now, this is not all of them. Between birth and 1 year, there is about 7 different milestones that a baby needs to hit. Now, those milestones are milestones. Those are not mile suggestions. Those are not something that maybe they should hit within 3 months of when they happen. They should nail them square on, or even slightly early. And when they don't, that means that there's a deficiency somewhere. Deficiency somewhere, and it can be neurological, it can be coming from the spine, it could be nutritional, it could be environmental, it could be mental, emotional because of the living situation. But again, we need to identify the interference and begin to correct it. Some of the key milestones that you're looking at with newborns and infants are the ability to start smiling, rolling over, and starting to sit and crawling. And that may take a few steps. Now, Annika, she was constantly playing catch up with her brother, so she hit all of her milestones early as far as the physical side of things. She was also much more verbal than he was, so she was a little faster. Dietrich was on the late end on most of that stuff. It was late, but it wasn't so late that he missed the month. And so that's something to keep in mind too. While it is a milestone, there's a little wiggle room for the front side of the month versus the back side of the month. And also knowing your baby. No one's going to know your baby any better than you do. All right? And this is something that I really dislike about the current way that our healthcare system runs, is the pediatrician wants to tell you that he knows more than you do about your own baby's health. There's no doctor in the world that knows more about your baby's health than you do. I can sit here and I can tell you milestones all day. I can sit here and tell you that your baby is fearfully and wonderfully made. I can sit here and tell you that your baby's better off eating real food than it is processed food, but only you know exactly how your baby's going to respond, and only you know and have that mother-child connection. Nobody else in the world has that, and you'll know that better than anyone else if something's not going well. You'll know if they're actually lagging behind on a milestone and how that's affecting them, even better than your doctor, even if you don't know what the milestone is. So breastfeeding, I really want to highlight this because a lot of people, in our culture especially, they kind of undermine breastfeeding. If you look at breastfeeding as a physiological process, it is one of the most incredible, miraculous processes that could ever happen. It is really incredible what happens. So, not only is the milk that a mother's breast provides perfect for a baby in every single way, all the nutrients it could ever need, but there are also receptors on the areola that measure things like levels of antibodies and antigens, pH level, and the mother's immune system, the mother's pH level, they'll adapt and change the breast milk to match exactly what the babies need. is. So if you want a healthy baby, there's no better way to do it than breastfeeding. Now, it can be difficult, right? And a lot of moms have difficulty with breastfeeding. And that's fair. Like, it happens. Not everybody's formed exactly the same way. We have a lot of similarities, but sometimes it's hard. But it's worth trying, worth making the effort over and over again to provide the baby with the breast milk, because it is really the perfect food for a baby to grow. Introducing food then, when do you do that? How do you do that? How do you do that in a healthy way? Well, there's a lot of different schools of thought on this. But the way that I see it is that a baby shouldn't be eating solid food until a baby has actual teeth. Because teeth are there to help masticate, to chew. And if a baby doesn't have teeth, then the baby's not going to have the digestive enzymes available to do that. Now, Annika didn't really get teeth until closer to 6 months. Zeke, who's, what's the date today? The 8th? He's going to be 3 months tomorrow, or yeah, tomorrow. He's already sprouting his 2 bottom teeth. So he's going to be ready for real food sooner. Now, what do you start him out with? Do you start him out with cereals? My favorite foods to give them are actually avocados, because they're so rich in healthy fats. And then things like sweet potatoes, because they're very nutrient dense. Those are very, very soft foods anyways, and then the sweet potatoes, you just boil down and then you mash them up a little bit, and they do better. Screen time. So research shows that under 18 months, there's no amount of safe screen time. It disrupts the brain too much. Now, realistically, as a parent with 3, that doesn't happen. I can't do that, especially right now. The first 9 months of parenting are definitely the hardest, and the closer you go to 0, the harder it gets. And if you have multiple children, it just becomes that much more difficult. So what we do is we really try to preserve the hours around bedtime to avoid that blue light, because we know in the research it shows that blue light disrupts sleep patterns for sure. And then we try to limit ultimately that screen time to less than an hour, and there should at least be 1 day a week where there's no screen time at all. Allow the brain to rest from that. Now, parenting has changed dramatically from when I was a kid and a lot of you were a kid to now. We didn't have the screens like we do now. We just didn't. I didn't have a cell phone until I was in college. And now my son's asking me, to borrow the phone so he can talk to his friends. But we know that real interaction with real people is always better than artificial interaction through a screen, through a device. And so it's very important that we make sure to limit screen time drastically, because right now our kids are getting an average of 4 hours a day. They're getting an average of 4 hours a day. And there's no safe amount that we know, especially for anyone under 18 months. So we do start chiropractic care now. That addressing the spine of a baby is one of the most important gifts that you can ever give a child. Make sure that there's no interference in the most important system in the body, the one that houses your own body's innate intelligence, and the expression of which determines your level of health. Health is a measure of 100% optimal function and healing, and without the nervous system being able to express itself, then you're not actually healthy, even if you're symptom-free. Most of the problems that I see in adults are because of something that happened as a kid. Sometimes even before the injury that started the symptom. And so, we go back to the birth process, and we talk about somebody like Annika. She was born very similarly to about 84% of kids that are born in this country, with an OB on hand who helped guide the baby out, guide Annika out. And when she got to crowning and he could actually get his hands on her, he started wrenching her out of there. And it's very specific wrenching that, if you look in an OB class, in videos, they demonstrate over and over. You put a gentle pressure, pushing to the side one way, and then another gentle pressure as they come out and turn slightly, and then you push down on the neck and shoulder as they come out to help guide the baby out. Well, I saw my OB do this for Annika and then Zeke, and then as a chiropractor, I evaluated their spines afterwards. And where Dietrich, who did not have this process, had only a small minor misalignment that correlated very strongly with just his birth path out, Annika and Zeke both had major misalignment and subluxation patterns that persisted for 3 days in spite of my adjustments. So even just that initial stress of being born the normal way that kids do in the United States introduced a birth trauma. And studies have shown that as many as 95% of our kids are misaligned at birth. And that's a medical study. That's not just the chiropractic study. Those of us that are really trained in how to assess the spine. These are medical doctors, osteopaths who actually get the training to assess the spine as well. And so this is one of the most important adjustments that happens, is the one directly following the birth process. And so yeah, we have pictures of babies getting adjusted here right after they were born, but I also go to the hospital and I adjust. And you know, I understand and recognize that I can't be at every birth, but if you have a birth, I'll be there if you want me to. I'll show up and I'll make sure that you're adjusted and your baby is adjusted. So if you're not proactive with it, if you're reactive with it, some of the signs that your child may need to be realigned is an inability to latch, is having a favorite side. Zeke's favorite side is his left, and he's always off on the right. And so we continue to adjust that as needed. Reflux, a common one among babies because they're spitting up when they get too much food. But some babies, it's a much more violent expression. I had a young child here, of a police officer, that was violently refluxing all the time. And it was affecting their mood, affecting their development, affecting their vitamin absorption. Constipation and excess gas, if they're not pooping well, that's a problem. And how often should babies poop? Multiple times a day. Really, Zeke is pooping 2 to 3 to 7 times a day, just depending on how often he's eating. Sleep issues, if they're not sleeping well, which is really all babies. No baby who comes out thinking that, you know, when the sun goes down, it's time to sleep, and when the sun comes up, it's time to be awake. Anybody have a baby like that? No? Walkers? No, I didn't think so. Okay. Yeah, no, that doesn't happen. Babies don't come out like that. But they should be getting closer and closer to that gradually. And if they don't have it, then it becomes an issue. That's not that thing. And then respiratory stress. This is my story, right? You guys heard my story, how I would quit breathing as a baby. 6 months, I would quit breathing up to 17 times in a night, turning blue down to my elbows. I finally blamed it on SIDS. Fortunately, I didn't die. But it wasn't until a chiropractor found that the top limb of my neck was out that they were able to resolve the breathing issues. And then another one that I see a lot of is recurring ear infections. Ear infections aren't normal. My kids don't get ear infections. I don't think they've had a single one between the 3 of them. And Dietrich's going on 6. If you look at most kids end up with tubes in their ears. They end up with multiple inner ear infections, and they blame it on what? They blame it on the bacteria, the swimming hole that they live. Bacteria doesn't thrive in a healthy environment. Bacteria is like a buzzard at a cesspool or at a garbage dump. It feeds on the garbage that's already there. And if you have a healthy environment, the child stays healthy. If you have a recurring ear infection, the child's not healthy. And they're also not lacking in antibiotics. In fact, that's the #1 treatment for ear infections. And guess what? It doesn't, the blood supply to that inner ear is insufficient to actually deliver antibiotics when you're taking them oral. It's not a good treatment option. But what is a good treatment option is actually opening up that ear canal by making sure the space underneath it is properly aligned and it has the proper nerve flow. We see that over and over, that kids that get adjusted regularly don't get ear infections. And if they do, we need to reassess how they're getting adjusted. So then we hit the toddler years, and the major milestones here, again, 2 years worth of milestones. We're summarizing it in 4. There's dozens of these. But you're looking at the major ones, walking by his or herself. They can, hold and drink from a cup. You get that starting to speak in words or short phrases. They start almost becoming a mini adult. And you guys know the phrase three-nager, right? It's a real thing. Annika is getting there. I can definitely see her teenage years approaching faster than I could even Dietrich's, but it's real. but they start to become their own individuals. They start developing a personality, and you see that starting to express itself in them. And so with that comes some challenges. One of the biggest ones being that they become picky eaters, right? They go from eating whatever you're putting in their mouth to having a very strong opinion about what they should put in. And so, the trick with this is really hiding vegetables, hiding the healthy stuff and the good, clean stuff. And so things like smoothies become a really good friend because you can put, something like spinach in it, and if you overwhelm it with bananas, or you can overwhelm it with strawberries. Here's a great recipe for a brain boosting protein smoothie. It's got avocado, banana, blueberries, walnuts. It's got the protein in it, and then you can do water or ice or frozen bananas in there, and it's just really great. And then we've got this whole recipe book, which I'm going to email all of you guys tonight just for showing up. Yeah, we got tons of recipes, but just for coming out tonight, I'm going to email you this. It's got a bunch of very simple, minimal ingredients, but also very tasty and delicious. It's a great way to get healthy food in for the kids. But yeah, it takes about 11 tries for a child to try food before they get used to it. So if you can hide it the first 10 times, maybe presenting it to them the real way on the 11th, they'll actually start to like it again. But yeah, about a quarter of us, maybe a little bit more, up to a third, would say that our kids are food eaters in the teenage years. Yeah, the teenage years. So then this is also a time when we're talking about toys. This is where they start getting interested in toys. And it's very important that we recognize that there are a lot of toxins that come from toys, especially the ones that are made in China. If you get toys from like the 1980s that were passed down, they were made in China, there's a chance that it might actually have lead paint in it. I know there's a ton of toys that I played with that were probably from China that may or may not have had lead paint, and explain a lot of my personality, right? Yeah, and lead is one of those things that actually passes down up to 2 generations. You can see lead toxicity from your grandfather show up in you, in your genetic code and in your bloodstream. So that's another one. We don't see a lot of it, but mercury, if somebody's been exposed to mercury, mercury passes down to single generation. So my dad liked to play with mercury in his hands in our basement. It's like, oh, such a cool thing. Oh, don't touch it though, right? It's very dangerous. My dad's saying that as he's playing with it. But another thing that we're looking at is like formaldehyde. It's a known carcinogen here. It's in just about every plastic. BPA, it's known because of plastics. Bisphenol A, it's an estrogen mimicker, and therefore a known carcinogen. PVC, and then lead, obviously, we're worried about as well. So all 4 of those are known carcinogens and are present in some amounts in a lot of the different toys that our kids are exposed to. So look for toys that are made in the United States. Look for toys that are made in the EU. Look for toys that are made in Canada, because those 3 countries actually have higher safety protocols for toy construction than just about anywhere else in the world. Next is preschoolers. So as they start to get ready for school, they should also start to meet some of these things. Now, as we hit that 5-year-old mark, now I'm starting getting out of my league a little bit, because my son's 5 years old. I haven't been a parent to these. I'm the oldest of 5, but I've never had to raise anybody that's over the age of 5. You get me? So I'm going to be talking to you from the doctor perspective. But these are some of the major things that you're looking at, is their ability to name the colors, form sentences, 5 to 6 words, play with other kids, and then start to get that good grammar. Speaking grammatically correct is something that we should see as we start to approach that 5-year mark and start to go to school. Some of the issues there are that we're starting to really see an increase in that digital world. That access to screen time really becomes an issue. And we're seeing that our kids, especially in this age range, are watching up to 32 hours of TV a week. And then we contrast that with how much physical activity they're getting. They're supposed to be getting 3 hours of outdoor time a day and less than 1 hour of screen time, but it's actually flip-flopped. We're over 4 hours of screen time and less than 1 hour of outdoor play. Now, granted, wintertime is difficult to get that 3 hours of outdoor play, but it's something that we should be focusing on, is getting them as much outdoor time as possible in that physical play. It helps with just about everything. Proper brain development depends on a lot of those cross-crawl movements that go on during this time of life. Another thing is bedtime. kids need, especially preschoolers, between 11 and 13 hours of sleep a night. I wish. I wish my kids would sleep that much. Yeah, and oftentimes we're making up for that with nap time or skipping nap time entirely, but they need it. It's there for proper brain development. So enforcing the strict bedtime and having that good routine and getting them ready for bed with the same routine over and over again. Something like an Epsom salt bath can help to prepare a child for sleep by getting them relaxed before bedtime. It also helps that they end up with cleaner sheets in the morning, right? But it helps just having that. And then another thing about bedtime is protecting the 3 hours beforehand with no screen time, because the blue light from the screens actually interferes with the sleep patterns as well. So that's a really important one too. So then school-age children. So some of the milestones we're looking at here: the heightened ability to describe feelings, the increased desire to be accepted by peers, has a longer attention span and increased independence. So, you see this more as they start to approach puberty with this, but it's definitely something that you're looking at. The social aspect of this especially, start to develop that independence and building those relationships on their own. So then it's time for school, and school has its own issues: increasing stress, increasing learning disabilities. You got all these things that go into school. Childhood obesity is a major issue though. 1 in 5 children in the United States right now are considered obese, and the statistics on this are pretty awful. If by the age of 2 you're considered severely obese, you have about a 10% chance by age 35 of having a normal body weight. If that continues and by the age of 5 you're severely obese, that number drops to about 5% chance of being a normal body weight. And so it really matters how our kids eat, what they do, their physical activity, because if we're going to set them up for success, we have to make sure that we're doing that on the front side. So what's for lunch? What are we feeding our kids? Well, right now, the government wants to give you a My Plate. And the My Plate has about 12 servings of grain and some fruits and some vegetables in equal portions and a meat and a dairy, and it's very uniform, and it looks good on a graph. Problem is that we're eating too many grains. It's mostly sugars. It's ignoring healthy fats, not just fats in general. And then on top of it, our kids want to go home and they just want to eat junk food, right? It's easier to feed them junk food. If they could pick a color for their food palette, it would be brown, right? French fries, chicken nuggets, pizza. And so it's important that we start to teach them from a young age that vegetables are good and good for them, and why they should be eating those. And really, it should break out. We should be replacing a lot of those grains, most of those grains really, with vegetables. If you're going to get grains at all, it should be something like a whole grain rice or a quinoa, where it's much more nutrient dense. So some of the things that we do with our kids are we do these supplements every day. So the kids love the chewable multivitamin. Now, most kids in the United States right now, they get some sort of gummy or a Flintstones vitamin, just not very nutritionally beneficial. Plus, it comes with a serving of sugar or artificial sweetener that kind of wrecks the absorption of that and creates inflammation in the process. So once the kid hits the age of 5, they start taking 2 of these a day. Before that, after the age of 2, they start taking 1 of these a day. And that's Dietrich and Annika just breakdown right now. Dietrich's taking 2 and Annika's taking 1. The detox powder and the probiotics powder, those I use as needed. So kids should be getting the right amount of probiotics from their diet, which means eating cultured foods, ideally. And a diverse spectrum of cultured foods, things like kombucha, things like kefir. Yogurt is the classic one that most kids get, but it's very limited in the amount of strains that you get access to, unless you're feeding it yourself. If you're making your own, you get more access to more strains because you have to control what's going in there. But then what I do daily is I do the omegas and the D3. They come together because they actually absorb better when they're consumed together, and that's to make sure they get enough of that vitamin D3. Now, if your kid's spending a bunch of time outdoors in the sunshine, getting that 3 hours, and especially at least 30 minutes between 10 and 2, they're getting enough vitamin D3. You don't need to supplement extra. But so often the kids are indoors, they're with the screens, if it's raining, you miss it, they need that additional D3. The detox powder I save for special situations. If there's a known toxicity exposure, then we do the detox. If they're having strong symptoms, neurologically especially, I'll do the detox powder. Annika had a urinary, a UTI, the other day, and actually it didn't show up in her urine at all. It showed up as tummy, and it just wouldn't clear it up with everything else that we were doing. Then we figured out it was actually a UTI referring up there, and we were able to clear it out. We added probiotics, we added the detox powder, adjusted her a little bit extra because she wasn't holding her adjustments as long, and we also added in the cranberry powder as well, just to make sure that we were addressing that urinary tract specifically. Cleared up in about 3 days. Once we figured out exactly where it was coming from. We didn't do antibiotics. Never got that severe. Antibiotics ultimately will disrupt the flora and make it more likely for more of those to take place later.
I just want to add one thing.
Yes, ma'am.
With the obesity in children, we're seeing a really high increase in type 2 diabetes as well.
Absolutely.
Which is what you typically think of as adult onset.
Yeah, classically adult onset. It's more and more happening in our kids, and it's almost 1-to-1. The rates of obesity and the rates of type 2 diabetes, they just follow each other, and we see it over and over again as the kids are getting more and more of that. So then teenagers, now you're basically talking about the transition to adulthood. Hormones change completely, and from a clinical perspective, I start treating teenagers, everything from 12 to 18 years, in a very similar way to that as I would an adult. From a spinal level, you're seeing some differences still, but we begin the fusion processes of things like your sacrum and your tailbone into one bone from the age of 12 on. And so more structural correction. This is when scoliosis starts to show up, most classic. If you're seeing that, it's usually here. Now, it can be later, it can be due to an issue, it can be a lot of different issues lead to scoliosis, but this is typically where we start evaluating for it. But some of those milestones, as we see an increasing amount of independence, they start setting their own goals, they express more feelings, and then that sense of right and wrong. And I remember being a teenager and that being the time when I had my most violent, not violent, but violently strong opinions on the way that things should be. Injustices in the world. I can't imagine how I would feel right now with everything being as divided as it is. But that was when I felt the strongest, and that's a classic teenage thing. But teen stress is a real thing as well, because we're starting to put adult expectations on somebody because they look like an adult, they're starting to act like an adult, and they experience extremely high levels of that. You combine that with this new digital world that none of us have really experienced as a teenager before, and we begin to see some of the gaps in just how that stress happens to them, unlike even how it happened to us. We see online bullying be more of a thing because what you can say from behind the screen is much more strong, oftentimes, than what you'll say to someone's face, and even behind their back in real life. So it's something that we look at. Fast metabolism, teens think that they're invincible, and so they eat whatever they want, and they have more say in what they put in their mouth. And it becomes more and more of an issue. So, definitely something to look at. So, some practical steps, tools. So number one, if you plan ahead, make a grocery list, you can ultimately save money. I would recommend that once or twice a week you replace your meat in your meal with beans or lentils to get a vegetable-based protein so that it becomes healthy. And you skip processed foods ultimately. Processed meat is one of the foods that's highest on the World Health Organization list for toxicity. If you know where your meat's coming from, you know things aren't being added to it in the process, that's one thing. But if it's coming off the shelf, if it has yellow label and red package, and you go and you look at that ingredients list and it's got 50 different things in the thing of turkey, it's probably not turkey in it, right? You got to look at the ingredients list when you're shopping. And then add more fruits and vegetables to your meal plan. Ultimately, we should be eating 5 or more servings of vegetables a day, and most of us are struggling to get 1 or 2. And so it's one of those things that we aim for when we feed our kids is get more vegetables in there. Some other things that you can do is you can cook food ahead of time and you can freeze it. When you have it available after the fact, just to defrost, it becomes much easier to eat. Or grow your own. I'm really bad at this. Tiffany is really good at this. Growing your own.
Oh.
Yes. I'm so bad. I do not have a green thumb at all. It's about as opposite as you can get. But it's one of those things that can ultimately save money. The things that are easiest, I hear, although I've killed both of them, are cherry tomatoes and lettuce. I'm really
Well, not right. Lettuce is not really good right now.
No, not
It's
right
way
now.
too hot.
Yeah, too hot for lettuce. Cherry tomatoes, it seems like people do really well with that. But at the store, if you can buy in bulk and you can look for sales, and if you can buy in the bulk bins, oftentimes there's savings available there. And then looking for those bargains on fresh fruits and vegetables, oftentimes at farmers markets, especially right now as farmers markets are struggling to come back, sometimes farmers will actually match your investment in produce 2 to 1. And so they'll actually let you get more for getting it from them as opposed to going through the store. Compare labels. Look at what you're getting. Make sure that the serving sizes are the same. Make sure that you're not just getting the dollar amount that says on the label, but the dollar amount per serving is what you're looking at there as well. And then obviously the farmer market. Anything in season is typically going to be cheaper, healthier, and taste better than things that you just might have to with. And then chiropractic, ultimately, this is the best gift that I feel like I can give my children. It's something that I highly recommend for everyone. April, you know, the way I met her is she actually got alien and she was having some urinary issues. Nobody had ever checked for the scoliosis. And no one had ever looked at her. Ultimately, they just looked at the organ itself to see if there was a problem with the organ, and no one could find the problem with the organ other than it was expressing symptoms. So we look at her spine, we see a scoliosis. We see right where those nerves go to, in the middle of that scoliosis goes to the bladder. We started adjusting her, and we got to take a look at her x-rays again. Just this last year, you can see she's grown a little bit since this. This is just a couple months ago. Scoliosis is gone. And it's not something that I have to hammer. It's not something I have to send home care with. Scoliosis moves much faster in a child because they're so much more mobile and flexible. So it's so cool to be able to have my hands on a child and have that potential available and be able to set them up for the rest of their lives. So this is the best gift I can give to my kids. So action steps. Obviously, I would love for everybody to implement everything in this list, to remember everything, and given that we have recorded it, if we can hear over top of the kids in the background, we'll have that available for the future. However, I don't expect everybody to be able to enact this perfectly. In fact, I don't even enact all of this perfectly. But the goal of having these workshops is to be able to take something, hopefully we've all learned one thing, to take that one thing and start to implement that. And then for the next workshop, be able to implement that as well. And so we have different tools to be able to do that. Like I said, each of you tonight, you're going to be getting one of these emailed to you, the recipe book, just for being here. And I want you to have these because it's a simple way. It includes an example meal plan. And we have these available for you as well. We'll pass these around. Everybody take one. You can make copies of that, save it to your computer. If you need me to email it to you as well. But it's an example meal plan of how to plan out through the week. But I'll email you this digital copy because it's about 24 pages. And you can laminate that, put it in a binder, put it in your recipe book, but just the ways that you can do that. But then there's upcoming events. We have at least one of these a month. This was supposed to be last week, so that didn't happen, so it's this week. So we're going to space them out about a month, but our next event is Women, Wine, and Wellness. So hashtag no boys allowed. So I won't even be here. This is going to be the women of my office, the staff putting this on for you guys. We're going to buy some organic wines for you. We're going to have some vendors with free samples, beauty products. Specifically, we're going to be talking about women's issues. So if you know a woman, if you are a woman, we want you to be here. We want to spoil you a little bit. And we want to give you the resources to have that as well. So that's an upcoming opportunity to take advantage of as well. And then next month, obviously, we're having July 4th. We'll have a follow-up to that. We're going to have more issues pertinent to staying healthy through the summer months. But we're constantly changing topics as we go forward. So connect with us. We're on Instagram, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook. Obviously, we're on YouTube. If you'd like to see Dietrich's head in the video, you can do that right now. I'm sure you've seen all the lovely children running through here as well. But make sure you're plugging into these. These are resources for you to take advantage of. If you've got the Align Your Health book, make sure that you use that regularly. If you have the Max T3, use that as a workout once a week if you're not doing it all. Add another day in. Try to get 3 to 5 days a week of a good exercise routine and plug in with that. And so I'm really glad that you guys were able to come out tonight. This is a fun workshop for me. Ultimately, having these kids is an interesting way to do a workshop, but we needed them here to have the people for this, whom this is most pertinent. So thanks for coming, guys. Help yourself to more. I'm going to go get some if there's some left. Yeah, I know the kids have been crazy. Thanks for coming.
I just had one other thing.
Yeah.
The ear infections.
Yeah.
We're still